Donald Trump's pick for Secretary of Health and Human Services is not just a terrible choice. He could be dangerous to your health on every issue, from tax cuts to more wealth for his fellow surgeons. Tom Price has reliably sided with the wealthy and the powerful against the well-being of the American majority. But our next guest also thinks Tom Price should have a little conversation with the law. Let's put it this way. Nancy Altman is, of course, a good friend of the show. She is executive director of Social Security work. She has a 35-year background in the whole area of pensions and private pensions and Social Security. And not irrelevant to this conversation, Nancy is also an attorney, and she has written a piece for the Huffington Post entitled, "Should Trump nominee Tom Price be in jail for insider trading?" So first of all, Nancy, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you again, Richard, so much for having me.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. And I'm guessing that this question just didn't pop into your head out of the blue sky. I assume you have a reason for asking that question.
It's just really shocking. In fact, you could go through all the nominees and, in fact, the president-elect himself. There is so much corruption. This whole idea of draining the swamp, they're just filling it. And as you mentioned, Tom Price is disqualified in so many ways. He wants to dismantle Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. He has all kinds of ethics violations. But what came to light, there was a hearing in the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee on Wednesday of this week. And what came out was really startling. There's something called insider trading that is a very serious offense. People who have inside information about corporations are not supposed to take advantage and make a profit by trading in shares based on inside information. There are a lot of famous people who've been caught up in that.
Martha Stewart, right?
Yeah. Went to jail. Michael Milken, the junk bond guy, wound up having to pay a $600 million fine so that he could avoid jail. Enron CEO Jeff Skilling is still in jail. One of the charges against him was insider trading. What it turns out, and it came out on Wednesday, that Tom Price has done, there's another member of Congress, another one of his cronies, named Chris Collins, who happens to sit on the board of a Australian biotech company. And Chris Collins apparently whispered to Tom Price, "Hey, I got a good deal for you, buy this stock." This is a company that's trying to get FDA approval, so they were trying to buy congressmen. And Tom Price, in August 31, invested up to $100,000 in stock. This Chris Collins invested $720,000 in stock. And lo and behold, their investment went up almost tenfold in just 4 months. If that's not, that's certainly probable cause to have the law enforcement, the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, and the Department of Justice look very closely at this. Not only should this guy not be confirmed to a position where he will have control over the FDA, which is what this company wants, is FDA approval, he should be being investigated. He should not be in Congress.
So he should not be, he should not be in Congress. He should not be Secretary of Health and Human Services. And there is at least on the face of it an argument to be made that he should be somewhere making big rocks into littler rocks.
Exactly. It is very, very, just the idea of it, that here is someone, he's on he's chairman of the health subcommittee of Ways and Means, a very, very powerful position. He has all kinds of big pharma stock and has used that He's blocked regulations. He's got an incentive to keep all of our drug prices high. And he's against all of these programs. It's crazy. But on top of that, he should be criminally investigated. If they're, yelling lock her up about Hillary Clinton over these email things, they definitely should be looking at insider trading of a Trump nominee.
And Nancy Altman, we're not talking about small change here. I'm looking at at least not by most people's standards. I'm looking at your piece. Price chairs the Health Subcommittee on the House Ways and Means Committee, and he invested as much as $90,000 in Big Pharma stock in just the last year. So, in other words, the chairman of the committee that deals with all these issues has a very large, again, by normal people's standards anyway, very large stake in a bunch of big pharma companies, Eli Lilly, Pfizer, Bristol Price Squibb. So, this is at best gross legalized corruption and very possibly illegal as well, right?
Exactly. This is the guy, he's supposed to be serving the public interest, and he's obviously lining his own pocket. He made, as you say, invested $90,000 just in the last year in this big pharma stock. And in just one day, on August 31st, he invested somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 in this biotech firm where it sounds like he had some inside information. In fact, one of the revealing, sort of shocking facts that came out in Wednesday's hearing is that apparently Collins, this guy who tipped off, if there was inside information, if you're on the board of directors, you have inside information. And if he shared it with Price, he may have shared it with others. He was heard bragging on the House floor that he was making millionaires out of people with his stock tips.
Meaning Collins. Collins was bragging, right?
Collins was bragging, and indeed, if Price invested $100,000 and the value has already gone up to almost 10 times. There you got your $1 million right there.
Yeah, this is old-fashioned and very, everybody talks about Russia this, Russia that. This is Putin-style kleptocracy as far as I'm concerned. And but let's talk for a second, Nancy, about Tom. We can go back to the need to investigate him for criminal behavior, but let's go back to and talk about Tom Price, the ideologue, a little bit, because the extremism of his points of view, I just want to read you a couple of things I dug up on him. And then first of all, the New York Times wrote about him that his Price's policy positions are, quote, often aligned with the positions of the American Medical Association and the Medical Association of Georgia, which it reflects his own self-interest. But I went back and I looked. In 1939, this is what the head of the AMA said about the notion of, among other things, Social Security, that, quote, all forms of security, compulsory security, even against old age and unemployment, represent a taking away of individual responsibility, a weakening of national caliber, a definite step toward either communism or totalitarianism. In other words, a fanatical opposition to the most popular program in American history, or most popular two programs since Medicare came later, Social Security and Medicare. And Tom Price, rhetorically and ideologically, is right in line with that. He said that the Affordable Care Act, quote, removes the very freedom and liberty that our founders fought for at the very core, unquote, and also said that its treatment of doctors represented, quote, the subjugation of a formerly free citizen, end quote. So we are talking about an extreme far-right, anti-government, anti-Social Security, anti-Medicare ideologue, right?
Absolutely. And of course, the irony, there's so much hypocrisy in this. These guys all have government insurance. They have the best health insurance you can get, and they just don't want anyone else to have it. This guy, Tom Price, is already incredibly powerful. He's chairman of the House Budget Committee. He's on the Ways and Means Committee, chairman of the Health Subcommittee. But just imagine if he becomes, and he could in a week or two, become Secretary of Health and Human Services, which is what he's been nominated to be. He will have control over Medicare, over Medicaid, over the Affordable Care Act, over the Food and Drug Administration and what gets through and so forth. And he'll be a trustee of the Social Security program.
Oh my
so
God.
He will have all of these programs have oversized influence. And I think all Americans should rise up and protest, because he is very dangerous to everybody's health.
Well, here's something else you said about the Affordable Care Act, which, for all its limitations, ensures millions and millions and millions of people and preserves the health of a number of people. He said, quote, "That's not America. That's not the America you and I love. That's not the America our founders fought for. That's not the America that recognizes that our liberty and our freedom come from God Almighty and not from the federal government." This is a guy who's being appointed to a high government position. Nancy Altman, I'd like to shift for a second on price. Here's something I've just written about in passing, but I want to go into more. You know, you're also very familiar with Medicare, and the fight for Medicare is integral to the fight to preserve and protect and expand Social Security. Forbes, which is not exactly a lefty magazine, wrote that Price, quote, "is an outspoken critic of the shift by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services and the Centers for Medicaid and Medicaid Innovation to pay doctors based on quality and outcomes." In other words, Price is big on fee-for-service. He's a surgeon, and I went on to talk about the Dartmouth studies, and I want to show that some surgeons maximize their income by performing too many procedures, or certainly as many as possible. So, one of the things people aren't talking about with Price is the fact that he's going to have the ability to rewrite some of these rules, right? He's going to be able to say, to block, for example, compensating his fellow surgeons or other doctors based on outcomes, and instead go back to, very perverse incentives in the medical world. Is that a fair statement, you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's radical, and he is completely out of step, as the quotes you were saying. And of course, he's, normally you would hope that there would be some checks and balances in this system, but you've got a Republican Congress that will just rubber stamp anything he and Donald Trump want to do. So it's a very, very concerning time. They talk about and the thing that's very important that people are not fooled is the Republicans are extremely good at messaging. They're not good at governing, right, but they're extremely good at messaging. So they keep saying, we want everyone to have access, which sounds like, everybody will get insurance. But as Bernie Sanders said in that same hearing, as he was asking Tom Price, he said, well, I guess I have access to a $100 million home. I just can't afford to buy it.
Right.
So access isn't what you want. Everybody has, access, but they can't afford it. What you want is health care as a right. And Bernie Sanders pushed him on that, and he would not acknowledge that health care is a right. He and his fellow elites they want to make sure they have the best health insurance you can possibly have. They don't see it being in their interest to not have health insurance, but they are not representing the rest of us and making sure that all of us have the same ability to have health care and the same quality of health care that members of Congress have.
Well, it's a grim picture of a guy who is a radical right-wing ideologue and represents the self-interest of the wealthy and may have committed crimes. So, Nancy Altman, what can people do to, it's getting down to the 0 hour, pardon the expression, on the Tom Price nomination. What can people do? Anything?
Well, yes. First of all, I hope if there are members of the media who are listening to really investigate this insider trading. This, as I said, is very, very serious. Insider trading is a crime. And people have gone to the penitentiary for this. So that the very first thing that should happen, the Democrats I know will keep pushing on it, but it needs to get exposure. It needs for the media to go ask Collins, what was their conversation? What did he say to get him to buy all this stock? Why did Price get this sweetheart deal and so forth? Because he bought the stock at a discounted price. So one role is for the media. The other is for the American people. Everyone who cares about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and that's the overwhelming majority of the country, should be hammering their members to vote against Tom Price. If we can hold all the Democrats and get just 3 Republicans, he's defeated. And he'll still be in Congress unless we can get the Ethics Committee to expel him or we can get justice in the SEC to investigate. But at least he won't have an elevated position. The last thing he should have is more power than he has right now.
Well, and unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. But call your senators, call everyone you can, and say, I don't want this guy, Tom Price. And if you're in the media, dig into that story. So Nancy Altman, Executive Director of Social Security Works, as always, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.